Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. So today we're going to be covering the content and class changes coming to Mage and Evoker in 11.0.5, and we'll even show some preliminary sims. There are also a ton of playstyle changes coming to Arcane and Frostmage with the patch, so we're going to touch on those today, but make sure that you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss the guide updates whenever those drop soon. Also remember, 11.0.5 is going live this Tuesday. First up is something that you know I'm excited for. So Dracthyr is now going to be playable for Mage, Hunter, Rogue, Priest, Warlock, and Warrior. All Dracthyr will have access to a new talent called Squadron. Basically, this allows you to squad up with 2 additional players and fly around in formation. This is absolutely awesome, and I can't wait to squad up. Make sure that you keep an eye out when you're doing your War Mode world quests, because I'm sure Evoker squads will be dropping in on unsuspecting players. Now, obviously, Dracthyr is so overpowered. There's a lot of the stuff with the ratios that they had to scale back. All Dracthyr will have access to Glide, and even though it is slightly slower than the Evoker version, it is still insane for movement. Glide cancels many of the knockbacks and grips that encounters have. It's useful enough just for that, but also keep in mind that whenever you glide, you're actually moving a little bit faster than normal. And you can glide during channeled spells and also instant cast spells to dodge some ground effects as well. So yeah, I'm definitely rage changing the Dracthyr pretty much as soon as the patch goes live on Tuesday. Tail Swipe is now Evoker specific, and the cooldown of it and Wing Buffet have been increased to 3 minutes. But don't worry, Evoker talents reduce the cooldown of each of these spells to 1 minute. Evoker class talents have also been kind of shifted around to compensate, so the choice node you used to have for your stops has been removed, and now you basically just get heavy wing beats for free. Basically, they replaced Permeating Chill, your slow, with that talent now. So you're just always going to take it because you want to get the second charge on the Obsidian Scales. And if you do want reduced cooldown on Tail Swipe as well, there is always the talent you can pick. It's in the place of the choice node, so it's pretty easy to get. Also, Unravel has been buffed by 25%, and it now benefits from Blue Iridescence, making this spell way stronger than it was before. Unravel is kind of weak right now, so this is definitely something that it needs, and this is going to make Evoker even better at breaking shields, and honestly, all the Evoker specs are kind of doing pretty well already, so this is fantastic news. Moving on to the 20th anniversary event, we have Blackrock Depths making a return in a revamped raid. There are also new events coming, like classic time walking dungeons. They're coming into the rotation. All this comes with the revamped tier 2 sets for Transmog. In addition, they've added tier 2 looks for classes that didn't have them before. And these are all inspired by iconic raid bosses. The one for Evoker is obviously inspired by Nefarian, so really, really cool set. And yeah, there's a ton of new mounts and pets too. I'm just kind of summarizing here, so if you want the full details, check out the Wowhead article in the description below for more information. Moving on from there, we do have a lot of mage changes. So first up are the hero talents, and Frostfire is getting some additional buffs, and they are also kind of redesigning how some of this stuff works. So the biggest takeaway here is that we are getting way stronger Meteor and Comet Storm. And already, Meteor is just really, really strong for Frost. Comet Storm is really, really strong for Fire if you're playing Frostfire. The issue is, in general, Frostfire just isn't quite there. Now, when it comes to Frost, specifically Frostfire, there is a case for Frostfire Frost. But for Fire, it's still kind of hard to imagine a scenario where you'd actually want to play these talents unless you were just trying to get the slow effect. Maybe in like your Delve or something like that. But anyways, they have changed Excess Fire. So now Excess Fire is going to have a Frostfire Burst instead of a Living Bomb. You can kind of think of this as kind of the same idea. So Frostfire Burst is just an AoE hit, right? It just deals damage and gives you cooldown reduction on Phoenix Flame. But this is kind of nice because it means that they now have an additional knob to turn that isn't tied to a whole bunch of talents. So it should be easier for Blizzard to continue tuning Frostfire, and maybe eventually we'll get to a point where we will want to play it again. Moving on from there, Sunfury is probably going to still be the preferred hero talents for Fire Mage, and there are some changes happening. Blizzard has kind of redesigned how Gravity Lapse works, and now it does a stun instead, and it has more targets it can hit, unless it's in PvP, obviously, and then it's just a root instead. But nothing really too important there. They have changed this, so it says meteorites are now summoned instantly. So hopefully we won't have to wait as long to get that Fire Blast refund whenever we play Sunfury now. And also they've adjusted the spheres, so now they should be properly anchored to our chests and not be lopsided. So this is actually pretty good news if you care about that sort of thing. In addition, Gravity Lapse cooldown was increased, although Blizzard put this in the wrong category. Before we move on to Spellslinger, let's talk a little bit about Fire Mage in the patch. So Fire Mage is getting some new talent changes. A lot of it is geared towards making our AoE better, but unfortunately, they have also nerfed the single target pretty considerably. And in order to get the full effect of our AoE, we have to drop a lot of single targets. So I'm not really sure how realistic it's going to be to play Fire in the raid setting once the patch hits. I think you're probably better off not playing Fire, just playing a different spec. The damage is down pretty considerably. It's about a 6.5% nerf, according to my sims and estimates. So yeah, not great. But we do have some talent changes to discuss. So number one is Majesty of the Phoenix. So this is just a stacking damage buff and also a stacking critical strike increase. So that would be 60% more critical strike damage and critical strike chance whenever you have this thing fully revved up. So you're going to get more damage out of your flame strikes. Now, obviously, this is going to give you a lot more value if you're playing SKB. And you can technically play SKB, but I really just don't recommend playing SKB as fire unless you're just going for AoE damage. Now, moving on from there, we do have a bunch of other small changes, and I'm not going to cover all of them, but we do have some increased value to the Living Bomb talents. And honestly, Living Bomb damage is not looking too bad, but there are pretty hefty costs to it. So I went ahead and put it in the new guide update for 11.0.5, just to kind of give you the full context, right? So if you're looking for a Mythic Plus build as fire, and you're looking to go into the Flame Strike talents, you're going to lose around 7% single target, but you're going to gain around 10% in AoE, which you could probably justify. If you're going for Flame Strike and Living Bomb talents, you'll get double the amount of loss to single target, right? 14% single target loss. But instead of 10%, now you're getting 26% more AoE. So this seems pretty worth it, at least at 5 targets. Now keep in mind, this 14% damage loss in single target is not accounting for the additional around 6.5% loss with the patch. So you're probably going to be doing tank damage on the bosses. But as long as you're okay with that, and as long as the AoE is all that matters, you could play the full AoE build. Just personally, I'm not sure if I would recommend it, but I do want to give people the option and the full context for what they're getting into. You can go into the Living Bomb talents as Ignite. The problem is you're basically giving up the same amount of single target as if you were playing the Flame Strike Living Bomb build, and you're not getting the same output. You're not getting as much AoE out of it in the end. So to me, it just comes off as like a worse version of this build, but maybe if you're always prioing a target, maybe that makes sense for you. So for the new talents, I went ahead and included options if you want to go this route. So if you want to try out the full AoE, you can just click this tab right here for Flame Strike and Living Bomb talent build. And this is basically like your full loadout if you're just going for as much AoE as possible. The only thing I would change here is there's probably a case to go SKB for even more AoE, especially if you're stacking that SKB hardcast with like a 3-stack Majesty of the Phoenix and also a Burden of Power. Like that's going to be a really, really strong Flame Strike. Other than that, maybe also going into Flame Accelerant. I could see that too, especially if you're going SKB. Flame Accelerant's kind of nice with that. But yeah, I'm not sure how much I recommend really going this route because again, you're going to be doing tank damage on the bosses. So maybe if you're just doing a really, really small keys and it's all just about how much AoE damage you can do, maybe that's fine. But in general, I'm not really sure how much I would recommend it. So yeah, just to show the notes, right? We do have damage reductions here and there's a lot of changes to the talents. That's how we end up at like a 6.5% loss. Aside from this, the only other big takeaway is that Glorious Incandescence is now going to cause your Fire Blast to basically cleave. It'll hit 2 additional targets. They've also done some slight tuning on the effects of Burden of Power, and they've made Hyperthermia better. So now instead of getting 0.5 seconds for each Spellfire sphere, you're actually going to get 1 second. So if you have 5 spheres and you have 2 seconds baseline, that's going to be 7 seconds of Hyperthermia, which is pretty nice. So yeah, just to summarize, fire isn't really changing all too much in the patch, except for it is getting kind of nerfed across the board. It's going to be more expensive for you to get those AoE talents. It does have really, really strong AoE if you go all in on that, but you're kind of becoming the one trick in that case. So not really feeling like a great raid spec, maybe better resigned to Mythic Plus, but even then, every key is tyrannical, so I'm not really sure how much you can carry a mage that's doing tank damage on bosses. All right, now that we've gotten the bad news out of the way, let's talk about the good news. So Frost and Arcane are both getting some really fantastic news. For Frost, we are now moving away from the Ice Lance spam build because they have redesigned Splinter Storm. Splinter Storm is now going to give us a chance at Brain Freeze. So the big takeaway here is since we're doing so many less Ice Lances, we do need something to fill that time. So we're actually going to be casting more Frost Bolts. And that actually is kind of a good thing because it means we go back to more of like a actual rotation for Frost as opposed to the Ice Lance simulator. And it also means that a lot of the talents that buff Frostbolt actually have some value again. Now, in addition to that, we do have a lot of like small changes in here. So one big thing is that your orb talents are now going to be able to give you up to 6 splinters on the orb, depending on how many times it hits. They've also added a new choice here with Signature Spell. So this is looking like the play for both Arcane and Frost. Basically, they have their own version of it, each spec. But for Frost, you're getting Consumed Winter's Chill with Glacial Spike conjures 2 additional Frost Splinters, which is really great because this incentivizes us to consume those Splinters with Glacial Spike. It basically makes up for the fact that Glacial Spike is a longer cast by giving us more Splinters from it. This also gets us away from having to use shifting power inside of our cooldowns, which always kind of felt awkward. Now, on the talent side of things, again, we are casting more Frostbolts, so that means that Frostbolt talents are going to be a little bit better. This is just the talent build that I was kind of playing around with for single target whenever I was actually able to get on the PTR, but obviously there's going to be some different variations. So big takeaways here are that I have Death's Chill and also Cold Front. Seems pretty nice in single target, moving away from Ray of Frost. You know, getting more orbs out is nice, and also another benefit to these two talents is that they're actually not too bad in AoE as well. Now, if we're trying to go more AoE with this build, what we're probably going to do is drop some of the stuff that deals with Ice Lance, so I'd probably drop Chain Reaction first, put it into Ice Collar, drop 1 point into Splattering Cold, put it into Cold Snap, and then I'd probably drop Cold Front and put that in the Freezing Rain if I'm doing more of like a Cleave playstyle, but if it ends up being like a really, really big AoE scenario, I could definitely see a world where you might actually want to drop something else to pick up Cold Front. But obviously the value of doing that depends on how many targets you're hitting. Back on the note side of things, so obviously losing the Ice Lance spam is a pretty big damage loss, so they've actually changed some of the Spellslinger damage to compensate. So huge buffs across the board. You don't really have to know how all this stuff works. Just know that the playstyle for Frost is going more to a traditional Frost playstyle. And I think overall, the spec is still looking very, very strong. Again, we'll cover this when we get to the Sims. But overall, these are pretty good changes for Frost, although I am a bit disappointed by how infrequently Brain Freeze seems to proc from Splinter Storm. So if it was up to me, I would definitely bump up this chance to proc it. But otherwise, I don't really have a lot of complaints about Frost. I mean, obviously, you're becoming less mobile, but I actually prefer to, you know, cast my spells and have a rotation as opposed to just the Ice Lance RNG simulator. We already covered the Frostfire changes for Frost. We'll have to talk about this more in depth for a Frost guide, but just know that the value of Ice Lance when it comes to Frostfire is much, much lower. And what we're really focusing on as Frostfire is kind of playing Frost the typical way while also trying to shatter as many of those empowered Frostfire bolts as possible. Damage, again, not quite there with Spellslinger. Spellslinger seems to be still the way to go for Frost, but Frostfire is actually not too bad. So if you really like Frostfire, there's definitely a world where you could play it. Just make sure that you're playing Frost. All right, now's the moment you've all been waiting for. I've saved the best for last. So let's talk about Arcane Mage. Now, we have to address the elephant in the room. Double dipping is no longer with us. May they rest in peace. Blizzard has finally axed the double dipping on Nether Precision. It is gone, but they were smart about it. So they actually gave us a talent to kind of simulate, not the double dipping part, but like the effect of the double dipping, basically giving us value in our next barrage whenever we consume Nether Precisions. Essentially how this works is it stacks twice, and you get 10% more damage on Arcane Barrage per stack, and you also get 2 Arcane Charges per stack. So whenever this thing is at 2 charges, if we barrage, we will keep ourselves at 4 Arcane Charges. We'll get 20% more damage on our barrage. Effectively, it's the same as Intuition, our 4-piece bonus. But in this case, we get it from consuming Nether Precision, which is really, really great. One thing that's really interesting about this talent is that you can both generate Aether Vision by consuming Nether Precision at the same time you consume that buff and get the damage out of it. So I'm not going to overcomplicate this. Just know that basically, it works exactly the way it should. There's no like double dipping or any component like that. It's just if you queue a barrage from a blast that consumes another precision, it will end up getting the correct amount of charges and the correct damage increase on the barrage from that. So good work, Blizzard. So Aether Vision is another way to generate a free barrage. So we consume Nether Precision a lot, which means we're actually going to get a lot more barrages now. So one of the downstream effects of having this many more barrages now is that we're just going to lock in Sunfury Execution. This is great for a couple reasons. Number one, we're getting, more execute damage because we're barraging more. It's better in AoE, and so if it's like equivalent in single target, we probably want to go it. And then the other thing is because we're getting more Arcane Soul time, if we add in even more Savor the Moment time, there's a case where it might be a little tighter to get your shifting power out before the touch, but really the reason why is just because we're just doing so much more barraging. It's just numerically better. So the other downstream effect of barraging a lot more is that we are not needing Mastery as much to keep our mana up. More barraging at 4 charges means more mana across the board, and if we have more mana, then we probably need Mastery less, and if we need Mastery less, then the value of Savant goes down as well. So it isn't just Mastery being worse, though, that's caused us to not go Prodigious Savant anymore. It's also the fact that, obviously we have to give up another talent here for Aether Vision. And also they've buffed some of these talents too. Like a lot of the talents have been buffed. But yeah, one talent that's definitely worth picking up now is Time Loop, so you can lock this one in. If you're looking to do even more AoE, we probably also want to lock in Orb Barrage, but there's very little chance of us going high voltage anymore. We just have like so many barrages already. I mean, with the new Aether Vision, like we don't really need high voltage to be able to barrage as much as we want to. So we're always trying to basically stack up some damage modifiers on top of our barrage while also getting that refund. And the way it looks like we'll probably want to play in single target is just like we predicted. We're going to want to stack a 4-charge refund with something that gives us more damage on it, and then ideally have Nether Precision as well, right? So that's going to be stuff like Execute, keeping ourselves in Harmony range. I'm sure there's going to be other conditions as well as time goes on, but obviously Nether Precision too. If we can get the Nether Precision, we want to have the Nether Precision on the barrages. This video isn't meant to be a guide though, so I'm not going to go into the details more than that. Just know that Arcane is getting buffed. We have a lot more cases for barrage. Damage is looking really great. And now the Prodigal Son returns, Spellslinger. We talked a lot about Spellslinger Arcane in the beta, and it was a fan favorite, and I really enjoyed my time playing it, but unfortunately it got hit really hard with the nerf hammer. Sunfury kind of dodged a lot of those nerfs and then got subsequently nerfed later, but it looks like Spellslinger is back on the menu. Now, it is still behind in single target by around 10%, but in AoE, this thing is absolutely cooking. And a big part of that is the fact that they've given us this new tool, right? Aether Vision. Also, there are other changes. So, we talked about this before, but we don't have to run Shifting Power inside of our Arcane Surge anymore. We can instead just get Extra Splinters every time we use Touch of the Magi, which is fantastic. We get more Splinters now from our orbs. And just like in general, a lot of other damage coefficients have been moved around. But basically, it's looking like Arcane actually has 2 fantastic options for Mythic Plus. With Sunfury, you're going to probably do more damage in boss scenarios where there aren't additional targets to cleave, but anytime there are 3 or more targets, Spellslinger is on top, baby. All right, couple things before we move on. Standard disclaimer, this is early information. The sims are not fully cooked yet. What you're seeing now might be different than what it is tomorrow and the day after, and you know what? Blizzard could just blow up the whole thing because they love to rework every mage spec every week, so yeah, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Also, I did not make these APLs. I'm not the one who tells the robot how to play. Okay, I'm not going to take credit for other people's work. It's probably someone else in the Mage Discord. Likely it's Porum for Arcane stuff. It's probably someone else for the other specs. Just recognize that this is an MMO and things are constantly in motion. Okay, let's go point by point. So I went ahead and made this graphic after I did a whole bunch of sims. Basically, my methodology was I tried to find a good APL unless there was already one that was like, publicly available. I dug through the Discord to try and find one that worked. And then after I found one that worked, I compared it against another one, and I just kept comparing them to find whichever one worked best for each different talent build. And after I did that, I put them all together, and then I ran it in a whole bunch of different scenarios to try and test it to make sure that there wasn't anything obviously glaringly missing, checking over the code, and then compiling the information and color coding it for you and adding this nice little graphic. So, single target, right? So we'll talk about first. We talked about this earlier. Fire is down bad. It's down abysmally bad. Okay, in single target. I don't recommend playing Fire and Raid. I know I just came out with a Fire video. I know a lot of people were enjoying Fire, myself included. Unfortunately, the nerf hammer has struck swiftly. And in addition to that, Frost and Arcane are both up bigly. Okay, so the end result is that Fire has just fallen off. Okay. But don't lose hope, Fire Mages. There's always hope, yeah? Where we may be at the bottom in single target, we can rise from the ashes at 8 targets. I'm just joking. So jokes aside, Fire is obviously really bad in single target. If you are playing this build, it is crazy AoE, okay? This is the new Living Bomb talents with the Flame Strike stuff. It's really, really strong, right? The problem is, again, say this for a third time, if you are playing this build, you are doing negative single target, right? You are below the tank in single target. Every key is tyrannical. You are trolling your key. That's not to say that there aren't going to be people out there who pump a lot of damage as Fire whenever they have a lot of targets the entire dungeon. If you can always pull stuff onto the boss, you probably have really high overall. But if you were to do that, if you were to constantly funnel the mobs in and get more damage out of that funnel, there is a better choice here. So you can see that Spellslinger is behind by about 10% in single target. Sunfury on top, baby. And Frost is pretty strong too. But If we go over to 2-target cleave, things shake up just a little bit. Frost ends up on top here. Frostfire is kind of crawling up from the depths. But, oh, would you look at that? Spellslinger is on top at 3 targets. Yes, 3 targets, Spellslinger on top. And would you look at this priority damage here? This is absolutely beautiful. What a beautiful chart. Look at this. As Spellslinger, we're doing a 1.79 million DPS to our primary target. I mean, that's pretty good. This is just 3 targets, though, right? We haven't reached our full potential here. So let's add in more targets, right? AoE. So AoE 5 targets. Now Spellslinger is handily in the lead. Okay, so 5 targets is a really good target count for a dungeon like Mist of Tyr and the Scythe. Obviously, it depends on which dungeon you're doing, right? Like different dungeons have different pull counts and different mob healths and all that. But if you are looking to funnel, I mean, this thing is absolutely cracked. Look at this. 1.87 milli? That's crazy. Like, if you can find a way to add mobs to every boss, you will more than make up for the damage loss in single target just in, like, pure funnel alone. But, again, Sunfury's not bad either, right? Sunfury is right there with it. So, overall, the AoE damage on this thing is absolutely insane. It's enough to make Spellslinger probably my default pick in Mythic Plus. And obviously, Fire's, like, not bad either once you increase the target count to this point. But, again, no damage online in single target, so that's going to feel really, really bad. And yeah, as we add more targets, stuff does overtake Arcane. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Arcane is kind of like artificially target capped at 5 targets, so you will gain more damage, though. Like, notice here, it says 5.6 mil versus over here it says 4.8 mil. So, like, you are gaining damage, and Spellslinger does seem to gain a decent chunk, right? As you add more targets, because it's getting more orbs out, the splingers are doing work. But yeah, that's kind of how things are shaking up right now. I'll have to, do updates to this in the future. I'm sure that by the time you watch this video, there's going to be at least 1 or 2 little details that have changed. But overall, the picture is coming together, and it looks like the chances of enjoying yourself as a fire mage in the raid are slowly approaching 0, whereas Arcane stonks just keep going up. Frost stonks just keep going up. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing my Dracthyr, Mage, Spellslinger in dungeons, and absolutely cranking that priority damage. Oh, one last thing before we go. So make sure you get your hands on the Treacherous transmitter if you don't already have one. Apparently there was like something wrong with how the robot mage was playing transmitter, so it just like wasn't using it right. But essentially the idea is if you aren't going to use Spy Masters with your Arcane Surge, then you want to put the transmitter on it. And keep in mind, you can use Treacherous transmitter like way before you actually pop your cooldowns, and that'll line it better up for your next set of cooldowns. And then you can kind of like chip away at that gap that you build at the start so that, maybe it's coming up during your cooldowns on the 3rd set. And now on the 4th set, your Spy Masters should be ready, right? It takes about 4 minutes for that thing to cook. So yeah, Treacherous Transmitter is really, really great. Make sure you get your hands on that. Anyways, that is it for today. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you click the like button for more World of Warcraft news and content, and make sure you also subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.